And so good afternoon and welcome to this Chamber of Commerce web chat, which is about the new border operating model, which will be upon us all with very little choice because it's going to be happening as part of Brexit, and it starting to get underway from the 1st of January 2021. What do we need to know if you're an importer or an exporter? If you're somebody that brings goods into the island or you send goods out, particularly with the relationship to the EU, things may well be changing very slightly. I'm just watching the numbers rise as those start to join us. Thank you very much indeed to everyone who's just joined. I'll introduce our panel in just a second. And whilst I'm doing so, let me just tell you that there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You can, of course, at any time just put a question in there and we'll put it to the panel. So please do so. You know, we like to keep them challenged. And there is actually a chat box for comments as well. You can always put those in as well. So we'll get ourselves underway and I'll introduce those who are on your screens right now. We have Senator Ian Gorst, the Minister for External Relations, Connétable Len Norman, who's the Minister for Home Affairs, Paul Ecobichon, who's the Assistant Director at Jersey Customs and Immigration Services, and Joe Carnegie, who's the Borders Policy Lead for the new border operating model. Thank you all for being along and giving me your time, and thanks to those who have joined us on the web chat. Paul, can I start with you, if I may, and just get this underway, because this is something new for all of us, and I think that hopefully we're going to bust some of the myths during this. But let's just first of all talk, this is because of Brexit, and those who bring in and take goods in and out of the island to the EU are going to have to do different things. Is that a basic enough opener for that? And you may have to unmute yourself. You have. There you go.
Yes, thanks, Murray, and hello, everyone. Effectively, yes, things are going to change on the 1st of January. To some extent, regardless of the outcome of the negotiations with the EU, things will be different than they have been. I think this session today has been prompted by a number of developments. One being the UK publishing their border operating model, and that outlines how they're going to phase in controls, both customs controls and controls for the for animal health and plant health type goods as well over the first 6 months of next year. So clearly we in Jersey wanted to make sure that we're in a position to let our traders know what we expected of them. Our version of the border operating model is slightly different to the UK's. It's tailored for local circumstances, but essentially it's designed to give traders some information so that they can start to prepare for the 1st of January. There's a few sort of checklist type things in them for them to consider. You know, the invitation is open to anyone who wants to come to talk to us on a one-to-one basis. Some questions we might be able to deal with today, but it is quite a complex subject matter. So yeah, it's really just to get the message out that this is going to happen, and people are going to need to prepare. And to prepare, you need to understand how it's going to affect you.
Thank you for that, Paul. Thanks for that overview. Senator Gorst, in terms of what's going to happen in the UK and the deal, or as I think we're comfortable in saying, likelihood of there not being a deal, as Paul outlined there, things are going to be different one way or another. Presumably, from your perspective, you will have been in discussion with the UK and with officials there as to representing Jersey's interest, if you like, because this could get very tricky for us.
Yeah, I mean, we always knew that it was unlikely that you get an early deal, but as Paul says, whatever with a deal or without a deal, there are some changes that will happen at the border. Today is an opportunity for your members, Murray, to ask questions of Paul and Joe, who can tell them about what they already know. But it's fair to say that as this negotiation continues, Obviously, there's always been is there going to be a deal, isn't there going to be a deal? Both of those continuing, we're nearer probably to a no further negotiated outcome than we've ever been. And yet at the same time, we're also nearer to a deal if that deal is a very thin deal and perhaps only deals with tariffs. So everything that Paul is going to tell your members today will still be relevant, but we don't yet know whether there'll be tariffs on those trade across the border with Europe. That will depend on whether there is a deal or not. If there isn't a deal, we know that then we'll fall back on WTO tariffs. But all of the other technicalities, most probably it would seem, because of the thinness of any deal, will remain as Paul and Joe are preparing for.
Thank you, Ian. And Joe, in terms of the complexities that you're having to go through with members, as Paul said, it's very much on an individual case because each business is going to be different and their needs are going to be different. But in the broad brush of things, if you're bringing goods in from the EU, you're going to need a customs declaration. Is that the first thing we should be talking about? I'm wondering whether approved trader status might be the first thing. Let's talk with approved trader status, because I'm sure that's probably high up on the list.
Yes, thanks, Murray. I think it's worth dividing this into two areas. There's obviously the customs requirements that Paul will talk through, and that's on the approved trader status, the tariffs and the commodity codes. And then on the other side is the certain goods that are being imported, what we call the sanitary and the phytosanitary goods, SPS goods. That's animals, animal products, food and plants. And there will be additional controls on that. So I think for the trader status and the tariffs, I'll pass over to Paul to talk on that, and then maybe later those questions we can follow through on the SPS goods.
Good. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Let's just talk about the goods coming in, Paul, and bring this back to you, because there'll be some worried businesses out there now, rightly or wrongly, because of COVID. They won't have made the preparations we are assuming that they might have made, and certainly from the contact you've had with customs, there's a lot of businesses going to have to do some work in the next couple of months to become au fait with what's going on. So if you're bringing goods in from Europe to Jersey directly, you're going to need to either set yourself up or get someone else to handle that procedure for you.
Yes, that's essentially the answer. I think you make a good point by using the word directly, because that is very important to reiterate that if you are bringing stuff in from the EU and you're not routing those goods via the UK, they are arriving direct, more than likely from St. Malo, you will be affected by the changes, probably more than the traders that are bringing their goods in from the UK or via the UK. So the whole point of customs is to facilitate trade. I mean, we're seen as border marshals as well in terms of things like controlled drugs, but actually we are there to facilitate trade and to make sure that the vast majority of goods pass through the controls without any interference from customs. So we're there to help traders in that respect. Now with Brexit, the arrangement that we've signed with the UK CD customs arrangement, means that we have to apply the same controls at our border as would any customs officer in the UK at any border in the UK. So we have to be aligned with the UK in this respect. So that means that some of the previous customs facilitations that we offered need to be tweaked slightly. We have an approved trader scheme in Jersey, and we're looking to extend that. And what we would recommend is that if traders are bringing their goods in directly, and they don't want them to be held up at the border, they really need to come and talk to us to become an approved trader. And there are some sort of minimum standards that are required to meet the compliance measures that we have to have in place. But what that means is that once they're an approved trader, as long as they complete their customs declaration before the goods arrive, and we have a few simplifications that will help with that as well. The goods are allowed to move through, as long as they're standard goods. The goods would be allowed to move through to the ultimate recipient, the ultimate importer. And if there are tariffs, we will defer payment of the duty for 30 days. So those are the sort of benefits that you get as an approved trader. You're actually reducing the interference at the border by customs, and you're having a duty deferment facility to allow you to manage your cash flows better. If you don't do that, then the goods are held. And then that's not good for the trader, it's not good for us, and it's not good for the warehousing companies that are going to have to hold those goods. So the last thing I would say as well is that if you are, again, falling into that category, we would suggest, and this is a suggestion, that you look to use a customs agent to do the customs declarations for you. We recognise that there aren't too many of those on Ireland at the moment because they've never been needed before. But we do think some of the larger carriers are recognising that need as well, and they are looking to provide that service. I can't talk about fee structures, or I can't talk about how that would be paid for, or who would pay for that, but it would be an additional cost and an additional administrative overhead for business. But in the long run, it could actually save you money. And this is an inevitable consequence of Brexit. It's something that we can't really get away from. It's unfortunate, but it is the negative side of Brexit.
Okay, so cost implications, just recapping on that. Being an approved trader will ease this transit through and the payment system over the 30 days. And getting an intermediary, a customs agent, to do this for you, in a lot of cases, may be the easier way. I'm bound to ask a question of the minister that has responsibility here for customs. There's a lot more work for customs here, Connétable. Does this mean that the customs and immigration services in Jersey is growing? Are they expected to do more work, or is this work going to fall on the businesses themselves? I'm going to have to ask you to unmute there, if I may, Connétable.
Yeah, most of the work clearly will initially fall on the importers or the exporters, but they will get all the support that we can possibly give, because we want to make life as simple as possible in this new regime. They will get all the support they need from the customs service. So it'll be a team effort, if you like, because the last thing we want is goods held up coming into the island, because storage facilities for the carriers and so on. So we want to make sure that everything runs as smoothly as possible. That's why Paul and his colleagues are there to help and advise as we get towards the end of the year.
Paul, I'm assuming that help and advice now is going to be better than help and advice when we're right in the middle of this and someone's got goods held up.
Absolutely. We'd much prefer people start thinking about this now, approaching us now. I think I can say that the world is not going to end on the 1st of January. We're going to have to be pragmatic with the way that we introduce these controls. And certainly, some goods will still be subject to enforcement, such as excise goods and those goods that, do attract a tariff. But we do recognise that this is going to be new, and we will build in some latitude into the way that we operate, so that we can relieve pressure on us, on the carriers, on the importers. It's just a question really of being able to assess what the volumes are going to be like, and that's difficult at the moment because we're not there.
This is going to sound
it's worth saying, Murray, if I can, the customs people have worked extremely hard and made sure that all the processes, software is in place to make life as easy as possible for business. Everything will be ready at the end of the year. Well, it's ready now, ready to put the buttons, ready to be pushed. I think that's fair to say, Paul.
Yes, thank you, Connétable. Yes, I mean we did start work on this over 2 years ago, We've invested heavily in our IT system. We've engaged with Guernsey, who use the same IT system and the same developer. And we are confident that in many cases we're actually in advance of the UK in the way that we can handle the goods coming through our borders, whereas the UK do still have some significant gaps. So the technical fix is there. In theory, we are prepared. We just need to make it as easy as possible to actually operate on day one with some latitude, for the fact that it's a new regime.
I've got to think, if you don't want to use a customs agent to do this, and you're a small business and you want to do this yourself, how complicated is it to do customs declarations? I mean, I think we've got used to doing a GST declaration, but I'm assuming this is an awful lot more complicated.
Again, yes, you're right, Murray. It is a lot more complicated. It really does depend on the goods that you're bringing in. If you're a trader and you're just bringing in one particular type of good, then you'll need to know the commodity code for that good. You'll need to know the value. You'll need to tell us what the Incoterms are, which are the terms of delivery, such as freight on board or free of charge and that sort of thing. So I think those individuals will generally be able to submit a customs deck with some training from us as to how to access the system and use the system. And once they're familiar with the commodity codes and they've identified the commodity codes, that should be fairly straightforward, again, depending on volumes. If you're a trader who may be bringing in a one consignment, which is 1,000 different commodities within that consignment, which some retailers might be doing, well, then that's very different, because you're going to have to, it's one declaration, but you're still going to have to classify each of those goods, those 1,000 goods within that consignment. And that's where it gets really quite tricky. That's where you have to have a good knowledge of the tariff, how to classify goods, good knowledge of customs procedures. You may want to use other sort of customs procedures to put them into duty suspension or storage or temporary storage. And those in particular are the traders that we would like to engage with us sooner rather than later, so that we can maybe direct them as to where they can get that training from and how to source that training. It's something that we can't provide, unfortunately, but we can certainly point people in the right direction.
I'm going to pick up on that point, Paul, if I may, and actually, excuse me, Joe and Paul, but I'm going to go politically for this one. Training in the UK, there is a grant funded scheme in the UK for training for this inevitability of people needing to know that. Is anything going to be available in Jersey for businesses in the way of funding for training to get them used to and get them up to speed to be able to do this? Because there's a bit falling on businesses here, and I just wonder if that's been considered as well. Let's go. I'm going to go to Senator Gorst first on this, and then I'm going to go to Connétable, Norman, and let's go and answer from both of them. So Senator, any thoughts on some training funding here for businesses, because they're going to need to overcome some hurdles?
Yeah, I mean, you're right to say that the UK have put aside some training money. There's no current plan to provide training money. This is, you could say you're helping us facilitate it on the cheap, Murray. But this is really what Len and his officials are doing, is speaking to businesses and Joe, and trying and being prepared to talk them through it, encouraging them to have a look now. If they've got problems, pick up the phone to them so that they can be prepared directly for their particular business and their type of good, import or export, as Paul has been outlining. And I think that the current view is that general training of a general nature, which the UK is doing, is not necessarily going to be helpful. It really needs to be businesses coming to either yourselves or to the officials and then being walked through what's required. And we hope that after events like this today, we can lead on and do more of that. I don't know if Len's got any other comment to make from the perspective of what his officers are doing and working with. I mean, I would reiterate that the Customs and Immigration officials and department is probably the most prepared department for Brexit across the entire government, because as Paul has said, they've been updating kit, amending legislation for at least 2 years now. So they stand ready to help everybody.
I suspect they're the most prepared throughout the British Isles. That they've done a fantastic, as we said just now a few moments ago, that they're ready to go on the well, they're ready to go now when the day is pushed on the 1st of January. But the taxpayer has already invested a lot of money, as Paul implied, in the IT systems to support businesses in this area, and they have spent a lot of time talking to individual businesses, and will continue to do that. But as Ian said, there's no plans for any formal grant system for training.
I'm bound to ask why not, if there is in the UK.
There's a lot of things that happen in the UK that we don't do here, like we have a lower rate of tax, for example.
That's as good as answer as I'm going to get.
Well, Murray, you know, we have a 0 rate of tax for businesses over here. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, you know, it's not all a one-way street.
True. Having said that, there's some hurdles to come across here, and as Paul was saying, I don't want to go down a complete, you know, drain pipe on this particular issue. But if we have training needed, but training that can't be supplied by customs, that training is going to have to be sourced from somewhere, and presumably sourced by the business, from what you're saying.
Well, I think that's pretty clear. That's what Ian and I have been saying. If any particular business feels they want to invest in further training, that is clearly a matter for them. But a lot of help and assistance is available from Paul and his colleagues.
Okay. All right. We're going to leave that there. But thank you very much indeed for answering it. Can you? This has come from Mark, who's sent a question into us. Can you please walk us through the process involved, covering the following scenario? So I'm waiting for the following scenario to come. But so I've got half the question there, by the looks of it. But as I read it, whilst I'm waiting for that, another question that came in, and it was: as a Jersey-based online retailer, what preparation can we make in advance, and what changes can we expect to see to delivery to the customer in and outside the EU? So that's a pretty technical question, but Paul, I'm going to come back to you on that one. So in terms of online, as a Jersey-based online retailer, the preparation they need to make in advance, what is that? And what changes can they see in the delivery to customers in and outside of the EU?
Okay, so the first thing to say is that if they're an online retailer and they're supplying the UK, then nothing will change. The UK CD's customs arrangement is clear in that respect. So that relationship with the UK, that trading relationship with the UK, does not change, and I can't stress that enough. So if the bulk of their business is with the UK, then you know, they don't really need to prepare to any great degree, because the same trading relationship will continue. Where they're supplying their online goods to customers in the wider EU, the dispatch procedure won't change. I think what they need to consider is what will happen when those goods arrive in the EU, because they will be treated in future as third country goods by the EU. So the EU will be imposing new bureaucratic controls on those goods. They may attract a tariff. They may attract a tariff under the EU tariff or tariff system. So they should consider if that's going to affect the goods that they're supplying the EU, because there could actually be a tariff on the goods that they're supplying. There may not be. The EU tariff is about 86% zero rated, but it's something that could affect their customer, because their customer will be charged for that tariff. Also, there will be administrative overheads when they get to the EU. So somebody in the EU is going to have to do a customs import deck. If they're supplying individuals, then that could be an issue, because individuals have never had to do a customs import deck before in EU, much as they haven't had to do them here. So without knowing, the ins and outs of the business, I'd suggest that they need to look at the proportion of goods that they send to the UK and those they send to the EU. And the ones they send to the EU, they need to identify whether or not there are tariffs attached to them. But they also need to consider that once they reach the EU, there may be a delay in getting those goods to the customer. And that could have an impact on their own business model as well, because people may not want to go through that process. But as I say, without actually knowing the details of the business, it's difficult to go any further unless there's a follow-up question.
Okay, well, if there is, we'll follow that up in just a second. And Mark, by the way, thank you. I now have your scenario, which we can walk through, and we'll do that. Joe, I'm just going to bring you in here, Joe, because it just occurred to me that if we are exporting goods, and we've been talking about bringing goods in, but if we are exporting goods going out, the chances are, knowing our island for exporting of goods, I don't know if any Jersey Royals end up in the EU as opposed to going direct to the UK, but animal and aquaculture particularly will be of interest. Presumably, that's an area that you've been working towards, and there are different rules concerning the export there. You want to just talk us through those?
Yes, thanks, Murray. I think certainly on the aquaculture one, that's quite significantly complex, and we've been engaging with the aquaculture industry this morning and in fact this afternoon as well, to sort of try and deal with the specifics around that area and direct to their concerns. I think the key part for the majority of exporters who are dealing in these SPS goods is the fact they're going to require export health certificates, which will add a layer in. But obviously, we are working closely with our customs colleagues to ensure that where we can make the process as seamless as possible. So particularly with the CESA system, we're very keen that all of the applications go into one system. That's more for the import, but again for the export, to try and get everything together. But I think switching it more from export into import quickly, I think one key point I'd like to make here, and it's very much online with our planning, is that the pre-notification of any import is going to be absolutely vital in this scenario that we're heading into. This will certainly enable importers to have more time to get the paperwork together. Obviously, the earlier they let ourselves know, and we do have slightly different notification rules for SPS goods as just for normal commodity codes, but the earlier that we are notified, and again that's through customs, the earlier we can obviously either pre-clear that consignment so that it can almost go straight through, or we can let the importer know that there may be a check required, and so therefore that it's not held up. But the key area we're looking at is obviously these export certificates. We are still waiting for the EU to clarify exactly what level of import requirements they're going to be putting on from day one on the 1st of January. The UK have been very clear, obviously, that they're going to phase approach. We're going to approach that slightly differently in phases. But however, obviously, as part of the negotiating tactics, the EU still haven't made entirely clear to what standard they're going to hold those import requirements from day one.
How about that? Because I was listening to you. Sorry. In terms of goods going out or goods coming in within those categories that you're talking about, and I talk about aquaculture as a fine example. It's not difficult in Jersey to start thinking about all of those suppliers now, and that you can probably count them on a couple of hands, can't you, in terms of those well-known exporters. So presumably you've been engaging with them already, and they already know most of this.
I think the key for us is understanding exactly what the preparation levels are. As I said, today we're already holding our first industry engagement events. It is a complex subject, and therefore I think we have to try and take it in bite-sized chunks as we go along to sweep up as many people as we can do to obviously enable them to get the knowledge they can do. I think Paul's made the point very clearly. Obviously, we are here. I'm not the technical expert. I'm not the chief veterinary officer or environmental safety, but we have people who can obviously help on those specific questions. We're going to put the information out. So you mentioned the sort of flow chart of how this works. We do have a product journey for import that will shortly be going up on the gov.je website, and that will enable people to then engage with us. I think if you're a trader in the UK, to talk directly to DEFRA or to talk directly to HMRC would be incredibly difficult, and I think for our businesses that is the advantage. Certainly if we haven't got the answer, we will be able to understand what the issue is and then go out and find that answer for people.
You did mention it can be quite complicated at times, and this is a complex issue. Paul, this is one for you. This is the one from Mark. He wants you to walk through this following scenario. What do we need to do if we purchase products direct from a supplier located in the EU, but transship the product via the UK exclusively using freight hauliers? What they're being told by the suppliers is that they need an EORI number to get the goods declared in the UK as they arrive. However, we've been advised that as a Jersey-based organisation, we're unable to obtain an EORI number. So I'm just wondering if that should be the freight hauliers that have to do that, but that's just my non-technical knowledge. So just walking through that scenario, what do they have to do there? Because the goods are coming in from Europe, they're on a freight haulier, they've got to come in through, or they haven't got to, but in a lot of cases, goods from the EU come in from the UK untouched and down to us. So this is going to be quite a common thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, and a question that illustrates the need for business to look at their supply chain, which is obviously what Mark's now thinking about doing. So yeah, there are a couple of options here. Now, at the moment, as I understand it, the goods go from the EU supplier via the UK down to us, and that's fairly seamless. Now, that works because at the moment, the UK is part of the EU for VAT purposes. And what that means is that the goods move freely between the UK and the EU. We're not part of the EU for VAT purposes. So the goods then come down to us, and they come down to us under in transit, which is an EU document, covers their movement. Now transit, for those who don't know, and apologies if I'm telling people to suck eggs, but transit is essentially a wormhole. So it opens up in the European country that's sending the goods. The goods then traverse or transfer through several countries in duty suspension. So in this case, it would be VAT suspension. And then they arrive in the island where the transit procedure is ended, and we would apply GST, not VAT. So that the purpose of transit is to suspend the duty while they're moving. Now, the difficulty moving forward, as I said before, is that the UK and the EU, after their messy divorce, they will not be part of the same VAT area. So VAT actually becomes liable as soon as those goods hit the UK. Now, in the UK, to account for your VAT, you need an EORI number, an EORI number. And I think this is where the confusion is arising, because a trader in the UK would need to provide that EORI number so that they can then account for the goods coming in, and they might go to an inland depot where the VAT is applied, the VAT sticks in the UK, and then they're entered into free circulation. The difficulty here is that they're coming down to Jersey. So my thoughts on this are that, as you said, Murray, I think the haulier is or the transport company. You'll find that most of those have EORI numbers. Certainly the larger established hauliers will have UK EORI numbers, and they'd be registered in the UK for VAT purposes. So what that means is, if goods are coming to Jersey, the haulier declares them into the UK on their VAT return, and then when they leave the southern port of the UK, they're shown as an outgoing on their VAT return. And then they just arrive in Jersey, and then we apply the GST or whatever other taxes might apply if they're a tariff. So that's one way of looking at this problem. I don't think it should be down to the importer here to have the EORI number. That's not my understanding. If the importer here was established in the UK, so if a Jersey company here had a presence in the UK, then that presence in the UK would be registered for VAT, and they would automatically have an EORI number. But that's not going to be the case for some of our traders. Now, there is an alternative, and the alternative is not to go via the UK. So the alternative is to start using the southern route, and you would ship the goods or arrange for the goods to be shipped to somewhere like St. Malo. They'd be in transit in the UK, in the EU, because they'd still be under EU VAT suspension. But then when they arrive in Jersey, they're just subject to the controls that we would apply to a normal approved trader and GST if applicable. So again, this is something for the trader to consider. Look at the overheads, look at the administrative costs. They need to speak to their UK haulier, definitely. But there are some options. But this particular problem should be solved by dialogue with the UK haulier. I can't see how it can't be. There must be a way around that particular problem.
Okay, all right, Paul, thank you for that. And it was quite an involved particular question, but I'm assuming, Joe and Paul, in terms of you're here to answer questions, but in terms of after this web chat, people can get hold of you. Is there a hotline number? Is there a direct number? Can people, because if I was to ask someone how they get hold of customs, and I'm sure there's a main number, but these are quite particular questions, aren't they?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we can pick up the technical questions, definitely, and unless Joe thinks otherwise, if I just give you one email address, and I can then disseminate those out to Joe if need be.
Sure.
So the email address would be rgc, which is Romeo Golf Charlie, .gov.uk, .je, beg your pardon.
Yeah.
And
.je.
And just mark it something like Brexit inquiry. Let us know what the outline of the question. Provide contact details. We'll get someone to get back to them so that we can either arrange a meeting or we may be able to deal with it by email. But we'd encourage all questions to come in via that route.
Excellent. That's rgc@gov.je, and we'll make sure that's up to everyone that's watching this as well on the Chamber website later. Mark has just come back to say, I hear what you're saying, but we're in dialogue with the hauliers in question, and they don't seem to know. So I guess this is all part of a learning process for everybody. We just need to make sure we get it in play early. I'm just going to pick up on one thing you said there, which was the southern route. This is a much wider conversation and goes back to our politicians on the panel, I suggest. With regard to the southern route, the southern route and freight coming in from St. Malo has been difficult for various reasons. We had COVID-19 restrictions, we've had stevedore strikes and the like there. And of course, we have Condor, who are going through a very difficult time at the moment. Is there, I suspect the answer is going to be yes, is there ongoing dialogue with relation to freight coming in on the southern route happening with Condor at the moment? Is there any assurance that is being looked at and there is a contingency that we can use more of the southern route for freight? Let's go Connétable Norman first.
Yeah, well, certainly I'm not in communication with Condor on this issue. I don't know if Ian's department is, but I would imagine that the Economic Development Department would be dealing with that particular issue. But there is a strong will to ensure that the communication links between Brittany and Jersey remain strong. You're quite right about Condor. They've had the perfect storm this year, which is very difficult for them. Particularly, they've just had new owners earlier in the year. So certainly we wish them well. But I'm sure the Economic Development Department is well on the case there.
Senator Gorst, it constantly surprises me that we have all these great goods whizzing past from all over Europe, going fairly close to Somalo in relative terms, and ending up somewhere in the UK, and then going from the UK back down south to us. Surely a southern route, and a stronger southern route, must be a good way forward for EU goods into Jersey.
It's a good question, and you know, Murray, when you were at the Ministry of Economic Development, that from time to time people try and encourage a stronger supply line from the southern route. But if we're honest with ourselves, not only does it require labelling legislation to change, but it largely requires us to think about facilitating different brands in Jersey, because as all of your supermarket members will tell you, for example, and retail's not dissimilar, it's not universally, but it's not dissimilar, their supply links and buying links are all up into the UK. You know, Marks and Spencer's ready meals, as I understand it, are put together in the UK. So goods come from across Europe, they're made into a sandwich or whatever it is, and then that gets brought down here. And so that's not going to change unless there's other brands here. Other materials, of course, you know, various politicians have tried from time to time to create sufficient demand for the southern route, but it's just never ever quite got to where it needs to be for an economy of scale. But with the flux that Brexit brings, one would have hoped that maybe, and I think the current Economic Development Minister would like to see this happen, one would hope to see that perhaps there might be opportunities to build that link with our neighbours in a stronger way than it's been in the past. But it's not straightforward, and it's really not a given.
There we go. I was just having a look at one of the other questions that's coming through, and I'll come back to that in a moment. I just want to talk about tariffs now, because we've talked around if you like, the logistics of bringing goods in from the EU, and in fact the exporting. Paul, before we go any further, are there dates for these? I understand there's two different dates. One is January the 1st, and the other notable date is July the 1st. Is that because we're taking a softly approach when this all begins?
No, so the tariffs are pretty much set in stone. They will take effect on the 1st of January 2021, and we will be applying the tariff rates from that date. The July date that you mentioned, Murray, is more to do with the phased approach for the introduction of the phytosanitary and sanitary controls. But tariff rates will become applicable from the 1st of January. That's absolute.
I think it's probably
I beg your pardon, absolute if there is if there's not a deal with the EU, that is. Okay.
So this is a bit of crystal ball gazing, but if there isn't a deal with the EU and the UK, and we then fall, if you like, fall foul or come into the UK global tariffs, there is a government gov.uk website which has got all of the tariffs on there. Some of those tariffs are going to, I mean, it's quite inevitable that if there's no deal, that prices will rise for each product that comes in, or for most products that come in. Is that a fair assessment? Would that be fair, Paul?
Well, again, I think you need to look at why the tariff exists, and the tariff actually exists to promote free trade. It's not there to hinder trade. Now, the UK view is that they've taken a very liberal view to the tariff, and actually 87% of goods are likely to be tariff-free because they don't want that friction at the border. The remaining, 16%, whatever that might be, will attract some sort of tariff. So again, you know, as a customs officer, I have no idea who brings in what. So it's down to business to check to see whether the products they import from the EU are going to attract a tariff on the 1st of January 2021. It can, you know, you can look up the UK global tariff. You need to classify your goods to do so. But generally speaking, you know, the number of goods that will attract tariff shouldn't be huge. There will obviously be overheads for those that do, but the idea is to have most goods free of tariff. And if we're able to secure a deal with the EU, then obviously we continue as we are, where there are no tariffs. But to say most goods are liable, no, that's not correct. It's actually, you know, a small amount of goods that will become liable to tariff.
Okay, and presumably that the list of that 16% of goods is fairly easy to find. We can have a look at it. I mean, I've already, I think, looked at beef, which I think coming in, a lot of beef imported into Jersey comes from Ireland. That's got a tariff on it. I don't know what drew me to look at red wine, but apparently red wine has got a tariff on it. So you get some flavour for what I'm seeking out here, but I think there will be some concern from consumers as well. So I think perhaps that's some of the messaging that needs to go out as to what's likely to have a tariff on it if there is no deal.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it won't break it down into the 16%. You've got to go and look for the goods that you want to check if the tariff, if there is a tariff rate, so that you know it doesn't just separate out those that will attract a tariff. Unfortunately, they do tend to be applied. I wouldn't say to luxury goods, but they do tend to be applied to agricultural goods, fishery goods to some extent, tobacco, alcohol, the usual suspects for attracting taxes. But it's not the case across the board. I think some cheeses might be attracting a tariff as well. So yeah, the important thing for traders to do is to check. That's the only advice I can give them is to go online, classify their goods and check.
UK global tariff, Google it, look at it, find out where the goods are. The Jersey-based online retailer that we were talking about earlier on, preparation they can make for delivery to customers in and out of the EU. The follow-on to that is we've been advised by Jersey Post that the LVCR into the EU, that's the LVCR into the EU, is now extended until the 31st of July. Therefore, will there be any changes on those routes into Germany and France before the end of July 2021?
Okay, so LVCR is the low value consignment. Now we don't set that, that's set by the EU. So it's not something I can really comment on because they're the ones, I think they've got it about £15 at the moment, or the equivalent in euros. So it certainly doesn't affect the exports from Jersey. Those goods may attract a tariff though, depending on what they are. But the low value consignment amount shouldn't change because that's a VAT threshold and not a tariff threshold.
So of course this is a complicated affair, isn't it, all of this? And we are in mid-September and this all happens on January the 1st. There's customs have been doing a great job, as we've been hearing. They're more prepared than probably anyone else in Britain. So it just seems that business is just waking up to this, really. Is that a concern for you? Should we, obviously this is the start of launching the border operating model. There's going to be an awful lot more talk on this, isn't there?
Yeah, I really hope so. We, of course, have been dealing with COVID-19, and unfortunately, when we look around ourselves, we see that that virus growing again in the UK and across Europe, and that's not good because it creates challenges again for our economy and how we can stay open and trading if others are closing down. We've done very well to date, but we need to keep making the right decisions in regard to those border policies and the internal policies. But at that same time, we can't ignore this issue, because otherwise it will come and hit us on the nose, as you rightly say. But there is still time now, and this is why Len and his officials are doing what they're doing now in launching this agenda. We'll be having more communications in October and again in November. So there's still time for businesses to get ready, but we recognise some businesses are literally struggling for survival, which is why we've worked with you, Murray, and Jersey Business to encourage businesses to think about basic things like cash flow and use of assets and borrowing. And we know it's a challenge to have to think about these issues as well, but there's still time, but they need to start doing it now as well. And I think with your support, with the support of Jersey Business and Len's officials, I think businesses can be well prepared. And as Len rightly said, probably more prepared than businesses elsewhere in the United Kingdom or British Isles, who are not in the United Kingdom, than any other businesses as well. You know, the good technical questions that your members are submitting are exactly what we need to prepare ourselves.
There's going to be plenty more of those coming our way. Joe, in terms of having feet on the ground and being able to talk to all of these people, it's a difficult time because a lot of people are not meeting in physically. So there's not a revolving door where people can wander in and say, I've got this issue, what do I do? So just going back to that RGC at gov.je as a sort of entry point for people to ask questions. I'm assuming that you are out there and engaged with those people, but I'm just wondering, it's not a very big pot of people, is it? Am I right in thinking that, you know, the trade between Jersey and the EU might not be massive in the first place?
Yes, thanks, Murray. I mean, it is something that obviously we work with customs to try and identify as best as possible what these trade flow rates are, and to even try and drill down to get greater clarity on what kind of commodities are coming in. Of course, because we've had effectively an open border, we've never used commodity codes. It's quite difficult, and we've done keyword searches and so on and so forth to try and get this data together. It's not excessive, certainly not from what we understand. We will obviously have far greater clarity once the commodity codes start coming in January. However, obviously for traders who use the EU route, it's incredibly important, and we fully understand that. And it's very clear that business thrives on certainty. And I think even the minister will be annoyed with me saying that, you know, sometimes we just don't have certainty in this, and ministers like certainty as well. So certainly for the areas that we deal in with GHE, we do know a lot of the traders. Obviously, they have personal relationships within the animal health or the fisheries sphere, and we would always say lean on those where you know them. And obviously, Paul's now given out an email address. There is also the Ask Brexit email address as well, which could be gone through. But again, if people have specific questions, email that email address Paul's asked, and again, we work very closely together, so we will do our best to get that question to the specific technical lead who can provide that answer. Again, the internal market discussions with the UK are ongoing, so some of those answers might not be fully clear yet, but obviously we're pushing that to get as much clarity as we can do.
Okay, we'll try and put the spotlight on that clarity as much as we can in the coming weeks, and certainly in October in the Beyond Brexit promotion, if you like, which is coming from government, and then Chamber will playing a full part in that. Connétable, you've assured us that there's been plenty of investment and 2 years worth of work on this. Does that mean that customs, because customs is doing not just it's people movement as well as goods movement outside of this discussion as well, does customs need to be bigger than it is? Are you happy that it's got the investment and the size that it's got at the moment? I'm sorry to sound like a journalist on this, but is customs going to be growing?
Customs have just completed their target operating model and their ways of working, and we're satisfied at the present time that yes, that they're adequately resourced. We've had additional staff appointed, not so much because of this situation, but because of the settlement scheme, and also the reduction in the de minimis in GST, which means there's going to be more work in collecting revenue. But also, of course, because of COVID in many ways, the Customs and Immigration Service have realised and recognised, and their customers, if you like, have also recognised a lot more work on clearing goods and so on can be done online, which saves on work. So yeah, I will always ensure that all of the frontline services are properly resourced, and I'm satisfied that at the present time Customs and Immigration are resourced in that way.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Connétable. We are pretty much out of time. We've had one or two really technical questions. No doubt there are plenty of others holding back because they want to find out more about how this will go. Paul, just give us the, if you can, give us the directions for where they find out where the border operating model is, because it's on the gov.je website, I assume.
It is, yeah, and I'd encourage people to take a look at it. So to find it, you just need to type in Beyond Brexit on the gov.je website. There'll be a link there to trade, Brexit and trade, and then that will take you through to some summaries, and it will take you through to the Jersey border operating model, which I would encourage people to read. It appears a fairly long document, but in comparison to the UK, it is actually a very short document, and it's constructed in a way that if you're just an importer, you can focus on the importing section. If you're just an exporter, you can focus on the exporting section. And there's also some guidance in there, which I think it has gone to some degree unrealised, is that you need to talk to or prepare for the EU's response to the UK leaving Brexit, because it's all very well and good preparing for exporting and importing into and out of Jersey, but your supply chain will have similar problems exporting from the UK, exporting from the EU, or importing into the EU. There will be bureaucratic changes, administrative overheads at that end as well. So business needs to understand that side of the equation as much as they need to understand the impact here. And I think, Murray, you're saying that you'll also put some links up to that. And we will be in the coming weeks putting more information on that website, which details some of the customs procedures that will be available to suspend duty to transit goods. So it's an ongoing piece of work, but that will be the central location for it.
All right. Well, listen, I'm very grateful for your time today. There is other questions that indeed will arise in the coming weeks, and we will indeed feed them in from any of the chamber members. And for everyone watching, we will be sending you an email with all of the links on them so that you've got all of that information as well. Thank you, Senator Gorst. Thank you, Connétable and Norman. Thank you, Joe, and thank you, Paul, as well, for joining us. We really appreciate your time today on what is a very complex issue, and we are, it seems, right at the very start of exploring where those difficulties may be and how we overcome them. We thank you very much indeed for your time today, and we will make sure that a recording of this particular webinar is also available for anyone that needs to rewatch it. Thank you very much indeed. Have a good afternoon, and we'll speak to you the next time when we're talking more about Brexit. Thank you.
Thank you.